on this week's 2-minute tip, getting the most out of your vegetable garden trellis. For crops like pole beans or cucumbers or even running butter beans, our preferred trellis method is these 16-foot long galvanized cow panels, and we support those with T-posts along the row, usually 2 or 3 T-posts per 16-foot panel. Now these panels are pretty easy to set up and install, but we want to make sure we maximize the utility of these panels while they're in a certain location in our garden. So for this panel behind me, this spring I had cucumbers planted along here, and now I want to plant some pole beans here. So you don't want to plant the same crop on the panel in 2 consecutive seasons, or probably not even 2 consecutive years. You want to rotate those crops. So I'll usually plant 2 crops on this panel, one in spring, one in fall, and then I'll move the panel to another spot in the garden just to keep my rotation going. So for this fall, I went ahead and planted me some of these rattlesnake beans and some of these Christmas lima beans. I just basically split the trellis in half, planted the rattlesnake beans on one half, the Christmas limas on the other half. Now I've grown the Christmas limas before and they do really well, really good flavor on those guys. Never tried the rattlesnake beans before, but excited about trying those this year. So what I did was I took my section hoe and just dug me out a little trench alongside this panel so I can bury my drip tape and then plant into that as well. Now I can't use my drip tape layer right up against this panel here because there's not enough space. So what I did was I put my drip tape layer at the end of the row and just used it as a spool. So then I just pulled the tape I needed off the spool, laid that down in the furrow, making sure those emitters are facing upward. Then I took me a little compost, laid a light layer of compost in the row, just enough to cover that drip tape. And then I just dropped my seeds in that furrow there. I like to plant them pretty thick. If I have to, I'll come back and thin them. But you can usually get away with a pretty thick planting when you're using pole beans on a trellis like this. And after I've got those seeds dropped, I just take my rake and push some dirt on top of those seeds, turn my rake over and tamp it down. Now you could do this with English peas as well. We've done this before where we plant cucumbers in the spring and then English peas on the trellis in the fall. Or you could plant beans in the spring and then cucumbers in the fall. Either way, don't let this trellis just sit here and be bare for half the year. Plant something in spring, then plant something else in fall, and you'll have good veggies year round. Hope you enjoyed this week's 2-minute tip. We'll see you next week.